Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Wonderful to see all of you. Thank you so much for coming. You're making this celebration especially special. Not a good choice of words. I also want to thank Vasanti and all the volunteers for making the preparations for today. Quite a bit to be done. They've all done just a marvelous job. What am I supposed to talk about? When I sit for rituals like that, it's very meditative, and then my mind kind of stops, which is not great if I'm going to talk to you. Anyway, wonderful to have you join us, and some of you were here on a celebration of my 50th year, Shashtabdi Purti, and some of you can't hear in back? Okay. Okay. Okay, how's that? Okay, very good. So, wonderful to have you here on the celebration of my 70th year. Many of you were here, at least some of you were here on the celebration of my 60th, Shashtabdi Purti. Some of you were here in 2000 when we inaugurated this center, when Puja Swami Dayananda came from Arsha Vidya Gurukulam. He came and helped us inaugurate and launch this center. And a very few of you have been with me or associated with me even longer. I'm just scanning the audience. The only one I'm sure about is Jim, who's been my dear friend and student for more than 25 years now. So it's wonderful. And what is especially, not special, especially wonderful about this is the fact that, you've heard me use this language, we are all on a journey together. To me, this life is very much like a journey. They call it road trip. So imagine we are taking a road trip together. Every trip has a destination, and according to ancient rishis, dharma, artha, kama, moksha, especially moksha, spiritual growth, culminating in enlightenment, is the destination of this journey. But then you all know when you go on a road trip, there's a lot of sightseeing on your way there, and there's a lot of sightseeing on your way back. What does that mean? It means after enlightenment, after you've reached your goal, then there's more sightseeing. How wonderful. You get sightseeing on the way there to gaining moksha, sightseeing on the way back. And it's wonderful to share this spiritual journey with all of you. It's the most important part of my life. Let me just share with you some aspects of my own spiritual journey. You may have heard some of these anecdotes before, but many of you may not. I think most of you may not. When did my spiritual journey begin? Well, in one manner of speaking, 70 years ago. But in a more realistic sense, as a child, when I was maybe 6 or 7 years old, I was raised in a Roman Catholic family. And this is the old Roman Catholic Church. It underwent some big changes in the 1960s. This is prior to those changes when their Mass was still in Latin, so back in those days. And one thing that you may or may not know about the Roman Catholic tradition, also all the Orthodox traditions, like Eastern Orthodox, they're very different from the mainstream Protestant religions in that they're highly ritualistic, really. So in the Roman Catholic Mass, back in the pre-1960s, there were, even today, candles, bells, incense, chanting. When I heard prayers chanted in Latin, and there's a certain mode of chanting, with the candles on the altar, with the incense burning, and all of that, as a child, I was moved by, most people would call it a spiritual experience, but not in a big sense, just a kind of an ordinary spiritual experience, we can call it, in which I felt really transported. And even though I didn't understand what my experience was at the time, I definitely had the sense, I definitely had the sense that there was something more than what I was experiencing around me. There was some kind of reality beyond. Of course, what does a 6-year-old know about a transcendent reality? It took me years to really understand what that experience was about. And I had many such experiences as a child growing up. On the other hand, there were some negative parts associated with the church. Their religious instruction was horrible. I'm sorry to say, the Mass was wonderful. Religious instruction, as a 7-year-old boy, I was told that if I committed a mortal sin and was run over by a truck and died, I would go to hell for all eternity. I was taught that. How absurd. What sin can a 7-year-old boy commit that's so terrible that it deserves eternal punishment in hell? Anyway, not because of the church, but because of their religious instruction, I soon became alienated from the church, became non-religious, and will flash forward to my 20s when I started to feel the absence of some kind of religious or spiritual tradition in my life that led me to reading a lot. This is back in the 1970s when yoga and meditation was a big fad in this country. So I learned yoga, I was practicing meditation, I was reading a lot in those days, and I happened to read the works of Swami Vivekananda. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And I found in his writings such wisdom that I found nowhere else. And that really predisposed me towards the teachings of Vedanta. I started attending regular classes taught by monks from the Ramakrishna mission. They had a center where I lived in California. And then, in 1981, Puja Swami Dayananda came to Santa Barbara to give a lecture. Actually, I have to share this anecdote with you because I don't think most of you have heard this one. I am sitting here today because of Edward's aunt. Now, you know this one. Most of you don't. Who is Edward's aunt? Well, it turns out that Edward was the close friend of Swami Dayananda's secretary in those days. And they were discussing, we should set up a program for Swamiji in Southern California. Mostly in those days, he was teaching Northern California and a lot on the East Coast. Said, let's set up a program for him in Southern California. Where? And Edward, her Swamiji's secretary's friend, Edward said, hey, I have an aunt in Santa Barbara. That led them to organize a program for Puja Swami Dayananda in Santa Barbara, California. This is in 1981. And I heard him speak, and for me that was it. I just because I had the preparation of Swami Vivekananda and Ramakrishna teachings, so I was ready. When I heard him, instantly I knew this is my guru, and it all continued. So I am sitting here because of Edward's aunt. What can you say? It's Edward's aunt. Should find out where she is and thank her. And she may be no more. That was long ago. Anyway, so after, there was another wonderful thing that happened is Swamiji's secretary, she was known as Radha in those days. Some of you may have known of Carol Whitfield, a very senior Western disciple of Puja Swami Dayananda. She came to live in Santa Barbara, California, and teach. This is in the mid-1980s, so my teachings, my study of Vedanta became much more profound at that time. I also began to study Sanskrit, which is really good that I started so early, because it took me forever to learn the language. So good I started early. And then in 1987, Puja Swamiji started a 3-year residential course in Vedanta, meditation, and Sanskrit in his Pennsylvania ashram. And I was so eager, like many others, very eager to attend that course. There were about 60 of us, 60 students in that course. We lived together, studied together, we worked together. We were living in the ashram and building it at the same time. You make a joke about that? It's like flying a plane while you're still building it. Which means it's a little problematic, and it was a little problem. Anyway, we dealt with that, we coped with that. That course went from 1987 to... The course went from 1987 to 1989. After the course, there was a little break. I went to India for some time, and after just a year or so, I came back to the ashram. Puja Swami Dayananda had invited me to serve as the manager of the ashram, and I was delighted because that place had become my home. I had lived there for 3 years, and also the opportunity to repay my guru for his teachings by serving as manager. We were all volunteers. No one got paid anything. So I was delighted by that opportunity. I served as manager for several years. Then in 1993, I was ordained, initiated into sannyasa in Rishikesh, and then it was teaching. So from 1993 onwards, my main focus has been teaching, and that has been such a tremendous blessing for me. In fact, I'd like to talk to you something about that teaching that you may not know. Obviously, teaching for me is going to be seva, service, partially repaying my guru, passing on whatever I have received from him, passing it on to other people and future generations. But there's another aspect of teaching you might not be so familiar with, and that is teaching is sadhana, spiritual practice. Absolutely. And I would say a very, very powerful spiritual practice at 2 levels. One is at the level of preparation. When I prepare for classes, I get a chance to read or reread, not just the text, but the commentaries. I love to read. And I love to read these Sanskrit commentaries. I'm, what do they call a nerd or geek? In that sense, I'll admit to it. I am a nerd or geek in the sense that I love to read, and they're often quite technical, but I love to read those commentaries. So that is done in preparation for each class. And then I would say that the bigger spiritual practice is the very act of teaching. And here's why. You've heard me say that the teachings of Vedanta are utterly unlike any other kind of teaching. It's not imparting spiritual knowledge or spiritual wisdom. It's not imparting information. But rather, it is using scriptures and using language to invite you to discover what I was led to discover. Which means it's really, really personal. It's all about, you can see the struggle trying to find words to convey this. Using scripture and words. Let me back up. When I first heard Puja Swami Dayananda teach, my feeling was so strong. I want to see the world as he sees the world. Whatever is his worldview, his worldly and spiritual wisdom, I wanted to share in that spiritual wisdom. And that impression on me as a student was extremely strong, so that as a teacher now, my goal, my orientation is to try my best to transmit somehow. And I'm still searching for the right words. Transmit is not the right word. I think my earlier expression was more accurate. Invite you, lead you, better, to lead you a little further on your spiritual journey, to lead you especially inwards, and specifically to lead you or guide you on that spiritual journey to the point where you discover what I was led to discover by my Guru. Because it is a life-transforming discovery, the most wonderful discovery, and these teachings can lead you to make that discovery. Puja Swamiji used to describe teaching with these words. He used to say, teaching is using words to create a situation in which the listener cannot help but discover what you want them to discover. So that is the purpose. The point I'm making is that teaching, when I sit here to teach, it's not like, oh, what does the text say and how am I going to explain that? Of course, I have to understand the text. I have to explain what the text says, whatever scripture we're studying. But that's not what motivates me. It's part of the class, but my central focus, motivation in teaching is that process of leading you to discover what I was led to discover. So that's another reason to call this a spiritual journey. So we're all on this path, so to speak. And I might be a few steps ahead of you on that path. And I'm saying, come on, hurry up. Yeah. Anyway, even if you're a little bit behind, it's okay. But that's a sense of using these teachings to, in this very personal way. And because it's in such a personal way, it's not, it makes it sadhana for me. Because I have to constantly reflect on what I've discovered in order to help you discover it. So these teachings come from that so-called mental space of that discovery. And therefore, when I teach, I am led again and again to appreciate that discovery and then share it with you. Unusual that I have to look at these notes. That shows you how that the puja, the rituals affect me like that. Okay. So, one last comment here. This is my main sadhana teaching, and you facilitate my sadhana in that way. And I feel that very sincerely. You give me this opportunity every week to continue deepening my assimilation and absorption in these teachings. You give me that opportunity, you facilitate. And when I say facilitate, not just as donating for the expenses of the ashram, that's a very mechanical thing, but you facilitate by sitting where you're sitting right now. And when I look and I see your faces and I see the expressions on your faces, that facilitates my sadhana. And honestly, I'm so grateful to all of you for making that happen. And year after year after year, it's been wonderful. Okay, now I was told that I should talk something about what it's like to be 70. Many of you know better than me. Not many, some of you know better than me. But anyway, let me share with you some personal observations on aging in general. For me, being 70 has so many benefits and just one little downside we'll talk about in just a moment. But from my perspective, honestly, aging, it's a process of improvement. We go on living our lives, growing emotionally, growing intellectually, growing spiritually, which means every year you grow beyond who you were before. That process of growth and transformation, I guess in my case, is pretty extreme because I started out in life with quite a deficit. I don't want to go into all the problems, but as a youth, I was in pretty bad shape. It was the age of drugs and the anti-war protests. I was pretty wild and reckless in those days. And this is not an excuse, but to show that over a period of years, that reckless, stupid teenager, and I really mean that, reckless, insensitive, arrogant, how many more adjectives can I add on? But you wouldn't want to have known me when I was a teenager. I wouldn't want. If there were such a person today, I would avoid that person entirely. And my point, as you know, is we all outgrow so many problems in life. Like I said, I had an extra measure of those problems, and fortunately, they were outgrown. I didn't plan on sharing this with you, but something significant. In the late 60s, lots of drug use, and I was right in the midst of that. Several of my friends died either from drug overdoses or take a lot of drugs and then ride a motorcycle. That's a good way to die. Anyway, I'm being facetious. It's not a good way to die. To my great surprise, this is nice to share, and I don't think I've shared this before. To my great surprise, when I was about maybe 20 years of age, for no reason I could understand, I stopped enjoying drug use. Go figure. Usually, drug use leads to further drug use. For me, it just stopped on its own. How? Why? The only possible answer I can come up with is Ishvara Nugraha, some kind of blessing that caused that which was impeding my growth and then allowed me to grow further. Anyway, coming back to 70, we grow intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, year by year by year, which means as we add more years to our lives, we become more mature, we become better people, we become more understanding, more wise, more emotionally sensitive to others, more empathetic. All of that continues to grow year after year. And in my case, especially with the teachings of Vedanta, because of all the sadhana I do, year after year, I just become more and more deeply assimilated with these teachings, just absorbed in these teachings, which is absolutely wonderful. I don't know how to describe that otherwise. That's unusual. Okay. Okay. I said, for me, growing old has hundreds and hundreds of benefits. I've kind of summarized them as growth, but one little downside. And you can probably imagine what that one is. And it's the effects of aging on physical body. So let me share with you a little bit about how Vedanta helps in coping with the aging of the body. First of all, I'm blessed to be in quite good health in general, but no one escapes little problems. I've got my share of little problems, and some of the little problems are problematic. And problems are problematic? Did I just say that? That's ridiculous. Okay. I don't know where my head is today, although after I explain what I'm about to explain, you might understand why I'm having this problem right now. And that is, many of you know that I've had some kind of vertigo or dizziness for many years. Some of the episodes would be really bad and debilitating. I couldn't get out of a chair. I would be nauseous. Other times, not so bad. Sometimes bad enough that I couldn't teach. So every now and then, we cancel a class, and it's usually because of this vertigo. Now, the most I don't know about most common. A common kind of vertigo comes due to problems in the inner ear. I'll spare you all the medical details, but I had that problem for I think 10, 15 years. It would be several episodes a year, and then it would resolve. One time I had it, about a year or two ago, it didn't resolve. It just kept going, which means I'm dizzy, a little dizzy all the time. And after seeing a number of medical experts on this, I learned that I'll share with you their language. They like this fancy language. This semicircular canal, which they call it, part of the peripheral vestibular system. Oh my God. What? Vestibular means having to do with balance, and that semicircular canal. It's a vestibule with little hairs and fluid in it. Anyway, they talk about all part of the balance system. One part is the peripheral vestibular system. The other part is the central vestibular system. What is that? In your brainstem. In your brainstem is several nuclei, they call them, nucleuses of nerves, all the nerves, and nerves in particular from that inner ear and nerves from your eyes. And they all meet there. And they do a lot of important things, like, have you noticed that when you turn, if you're looking at someone, you can turn your head and continue looking at them. That's pretty cool. That's back here. You don't have to, when you turn your head, do you have to consciously move your eyeballs? That's all done automatically. And it's all done back here in the central vestibular system. Anyway, let me stop giving you a medical science class here. But what's happened is this inner ear problem has created a problem with the nerves in that brainstem. And anyway, it's become a problem of the central vestibular system. There's all kinds of fancy terminology for it. You can look up PPPD. They have all these complicated acronyms, but all it means is persistent dizziness. In fact, the first P and the D is persistent dizziness. And usually it's not so bad. Right now, it's not so bad. So it causes some problem. Because you can imagine if you're dizzy, a little hard to think clearly. And if I get really dizzy, I can't sit here and teach. Fortunately, that's not much of the time. That is really bad. But here, interesting, when I learned about these problems, the literature said that many, many patients struggle with anxiety, depression, and fear as a result of this dizziness. So imagine if you felt dizzy and a dizziness just wouldn't go away. For some people, that creates anxiety. They're afraid of falling. They're afraid, how can I walk? There are some visual patterns which are extremely distracting and make you even more dizzy. So a number of patients, in fact, quite a few apparently, really struggle with their fear and anxiety due to these symptoms. And not surprisingly, their fear and anxiety makes the symptoms worse. Symptoms get worse, fear and anxiety grows. More fear and anxiety strengthens the symptoms, and sadly, it becomes quite debilitating for many patients who struggle with this. I was surprised I never even considered that to be worried or fearful or anxious about this dizziness. And here's where Vedanta walks in the door, so to speak. Vedanta walks in the door in this way. When I'm dizzy, I'm okay. Does consciousness get dizzy? My consciousness is unchanging. I feel absolutely unthreatened. Is that a word? I'm not threatened in any way whatsoever by these symptoms. Oh, the dizziness is there. What can I do? So I'm dizzy. It's a fact of life. Like this chair is red is a fact of life, and things are dizzy is a fact of life. There's no fear. There's no non-acceptance. There's no resentment. There's no, I wish it would go away. These are common responses to any illness. And these are the responses that cause suffering. You've probably heard me say in a class the difference between pain and suffering. Pain is a sensation. Suffering is how you respond to that sensation. So here, the sensation is dizziness. What is my response? No response. It is what it is. There's complete acceptance of what it is, and that I can only attribute to the teachings of Vedanta. Honestly, the dizziness doesn't affect me. It affects my mind. Absolutely, it affects my mind. It doesn't affect me. And any other phones, maybe? And just check, make sure they're off. This is absolutely the blessing, a blessing, there's more coming. One blessing of Vedanta in dealing with aging of the body is this. To the extent you are identified with your body and mind, to that extent, when there are problems in the body and mind, you will suffer. Guaranteed. If you want to suffer more, then identify more. If you want to suffer less, then with the help of these teachings, you come to recognize your true nature as unchanging consciousness. Unchanging consciousness that is utterly independent of the body and mind. Unchanging consciousness by definition cannot be affected by the body and mind. Vedanta leads you to this understanding. And with this understanding, dealing with physical and mental problems is so much easier. It's not a big deal. My guru used to say, Vedanta converts problems into situations. That's simple. Being dizzy, oh my gosh, I'm dizzy. It's a problem. Being dizzy, for a Vedantan, what to do? What did he say? Kya karenge? What can be done? And it's okay. You just say, rakne do. Let it be. Don't worry about it. And you can do that, by the way. You can't fake this. You can't just say, oh, it's just my body. Oh, it's just my mind. It doesn't work. You have to discover that you are unchanging consciousness. That discovery allows you to disidentify with your body and mind. But until and unless you make that discovery, that identification continues. So, in this way, you can imagine going forward, let's be very clear, we are all going to have, I'll turn it into a question. In coming years, are you going to have more physical problems or fewer physical problems? That's pretty obvious. And That's a bad joke. I won't make that one. So I have a sensor up here. And X. A little bit like Vasanti when she reads my scripts. Sometimes there's a bit. So she edits the scripts for my videos. Sometimes it's an X. Anyway, coming back here. So a good strategy for dealing with the problems of aging, body and mind, a good strategy is continue your studies and meditation. Continue to immerse yourself in these teachings of Advaita Vedanta until that understanding that you, in essence, are unchanging consciousness. To gain that perspective is the solution. The, with the capital THE, that is the solution to the problems of aging. I'd like to add one more thing here, because all the Vedanta in the world won't make this dizziness go away. So how to deal with, can Vedanta help you deal with this, with the symptoms? So I can not resent the dizziness or wish it to go away, but how to more gracefully deal with symptoms using the teachings of Vedanta. And there are two strategies, at least two strategies that I use. One is detachment. Since I am unchanging consciousness, it's not hard to create some mental distance between me and the dizziness. The dizziness is out there. The dizziness is affecting the mind that's out there in my experience. In other words, the dizziness is not inside my being. The dizziness is external to me. And with that mental distance, it becomes less noticeable. If something, in American English, you say something is in your face. That which is in your face, you can't ignore. But that which is distant is easy to ignore. So with this mental distance through detachment, I can create this distance so that I don't even notice much. Depends. In fact, I was very surprised. This dizziness, not surprisingly, makes meditation more difficult. But if I really work at the meditation, in other words, I use some pretty vigorous techniques and make a big effort, I can actually push through these symptoms and actually, at least while I'm deeply absorbed in meditation, there's no dizziness. So that's kind of the maximum detachment, is to be deeply absorbed in meditation. If I'm deeply absorbed in meditation, the dizziness goes away. But there's a catch-22 here. And that is, suppose, and by the way, this may be meaningful to many of you later when we confront serious health problems. Let me describe it. So think about how this might apply to you as I describe it. There are times when the dizziness is so intense that I can't think. I can't think clearly. And not only that, lots of fatigue comes along with it and all of that. If you're really fatigued and can't think clearly, then that mental space becomes much harder to accomplish. And meditation becomes impossible. What I'm suggesting is that we don't know, and I pray for each and every one of you that you not have any problems, but we don't know. We may encounter a problem that affects our minds quite a bit. Then how to cope? If your mind is so much affected, then what? And look at the argument. Vedanta is in your mind. In fact, I've had this question. Swamiji, can you forget being enlightened? And usually it comes in this context. If you're enlightened and then you get Alzheimer's, then what? Favorite question. I'll tell you my own experience. So there are times, thank goodness I don't have Alzheimer's. I don't, future we don't know, but anyway, my mind is working fine right now. But occasionally I get so dizzy, I can't think clearly, I can't meditate, it's just a mess. Then what is the value of Vedanta in particular and spiritual life in general? The value is this: when that happens to me, I just surrender. Remember, there's a deeply devotional aspect to this tradition of Advaita Vedanta. It's not all cognitive. It's also emotional. Turns out that all this dizziness can affect me cognitively very strongly. But when your mind is spinning like that, your emotions are kind of the same, unaffected. And even neuroscience tells us that emotions and cognitions physically take place in different parts of your brain. So it's not surprising that you can have cognitive dysfunction, like Alzheimer's, but still have your emotions more or less intact. Suppose your emotions are molded by years and years of prayer and devotion and devotional practices. When your emotions are molded in that way, to experience a feeling of being cared for is easy to feel. And not at the beginning, I admit that. It takes time to cultivate that. The point I'm making is that years of Vedantic study can allow me to not be threatened by whatever is happening, knowing that I am pure, unchanging consciousness, unaffected by all that. But even when the mind is so clouded due to various symptoms, and Vedanta, you can't think clearly. If you can't think clearly, how are you going to think, I am unchanging consciousness? It's honestly hard to reflect on being unchanging consciousness when everything is spinning. But what's not hard to do is to surrender. Having practiced so much prayer and devotion and devotional meditation, for me in particular, that prepares the emotions in such a way. It's like an emotional state that you can drop into, so to speak, at will. Let me try to make that a little bit more concrete, and then I'll wrap up my talk here in just a moment. Many of you have had some kind of devotional feeling of surrender. For example, if you come to the temple, if you come to an altar of a temple that you are deeply, deeply connected to, and you sit there and you can feel, just imagine feeling that deep sense of surrender. For me, that deep sense of surrender means everything is okay. It's like the child with mom sitting right there, or a child, better, child sitting in mom's lap. Everything is absolutely okay because of that intimacy with the caregiver. Well, intimacy with Ishvara is intimacy with the caregiver, the one from whom all care is received. So now, if you can feel that sitting in front of an altar and feel that very strongly, why just in front of the altar? The entire world is an altar. I like this metaphor. An altar is a place where Ishvara is available for worship, right? Hear that definition again. What is an altar? An altar is a physical location where Ishvara is available for worship. Tell me, where in the world is Ishvara absent? Which means Ishvara is available everywhere. And that's what I mean when I say the world is an altar. So if you can feel, wherever you are, that same sense of surrender, that same sense of being cared for, that same sense of feeling that everything is okay, that sense of surrender you may have in front of an altar, you can have that sense any time, even when there's cognitive impairment. So here is a strategy for dealing with future aging problems. We have the powerful teachings of Vedanta, which help you disidentify with your body and mind to such an extent that the problems of your body belong to your body, the problems of your mind belong to your mind, and no problems belong to you as unchanging consciousness. That's the first we'll say, benefit of Advaita Vedanta in coping with the problems of aging. Further benefits, as I said, is that sense of distance, detachment, or even deep meditation to escape the limitations of the body and mind. But I think the final part is perhaps the most important part. And that is, if you include in your daily spiritual practice, if you include some form of prayer, some kind of devotional practice, and if that grows and grows and grows and grows very deep, then that creates, shall we call it, an emotional samskara? I'm making that up. Sounds good. Let's call it an emotional samskara, an emotional inclination for this kind of surrender, where you feel okay, you feel cared for, no matter what is happening to your body, no matter what is happening to your mind, you feel surrendered in the sense of you feel cared for. You are sitting at the altar. Right now, we are all sitting at an altar in Ishvara's presence. We can feel Ishvara's presence and feel cared for in such a way that we can better cope with the problems of our bodies and minds. Okay, that was a little heavy, but we're talking about dealing with aging, and aging is a heavy topic. But just to recap the first part, in my opinion, being 70 is better than being 60. Being 60 is better than being 50, 40, 30, whole lot better than being 20. For me, the worst. Absolutely the worst. Between 15 and 20. Just horrible. Anyway. But watch, if being 70 is better than 60, then being 80, honestly, I admit there will be many more problems here. But where it counts, in terms of wisdom, in terms of appreciation of life, in terms of being immersed in the oneness of reality, if it's good at 70, it'll be that much better at 80. This is life. It's all going in that wonderful direction. And to finish this reflection, how nice to share that life of spiritual growth with all of you. And I pray for each and every one of us that this journey of spiritual growth will go on year after year, decade after decade. So if 80 is better than 70, what's better than 80? Go for it! 90, why not? And go for it. And with medical technology today, many, many, many people are living into their 90s and beyond. So we don't know, but anyway, so go for it, as they say. As we conclude, first, I don't want to forget, I want to wish all of you a very happy Deepavali, and your families and friends. It's a wonderful celebration. We won't have any program tomorrow to allow you to spend Deepavali with your family and friends, but I wish you all the best on this occasion. And we'll end with a prayer in just a moment, but I think Vasanti, turn the light on. Vasanti has a few things to say.
Namaste Swamiji, namaste everyone again, welcome. 2 more little surprises for Swamiji.
Oh.
I would like to invite Ashwin Kansagra and Ashwin Sampat to come to the stage and honor Swamiji, please.
Thank you. Om. Parameshvara. Go. Om Parameshvara. Om.
Last week when both the Ashwins I was talking to them, they reminded me that in Sanskrit for 2 Ashwins is Ashwinau. So we're
twin deities, Ashwinau.
So we're going to take a little segue for the next surprise we have for Swamiji. All our Sanskrit students have practiced very hard to sing a song for Swamiji, and I invite them to come to the front towards the altar.
Good.
So as they're walking up, of course, this is no birthday, at least in this culture, no birthday is complete without a happy birthday song. So they're going to be singing the happy birthday song. They're going to sing in English. and I welcome you to join them just for the first two verses, because we have modified the song to include a few more verses in English. And after that, they will sing the same in Sanskrit, so we can enjoy it.
Is it yours? Huh?
So I would like to thank Vikram and all the others who took the lead, and they really wanted to practice in the hall and practice downstairs, and I said it's not happening because it was going to be a surprise. So they practiced in the cold parking lot outside.
My gosh. And do I understand this is your composition?
Swamiji, with everybody's help. We have some good Sanskrit students.
And a good Sanskrit teacher.
So thank you all for the effort and to the
Wonderful
singers. So I think the surprises are over for Swamiji. So just some closing remarks before we wind up the program. Swamiji will lead us in our closing prayers. He will be seated at his chair itself. After that, he will sit out here. You're welcome to come and greet him and get his blessings. And then as you leave the main door, Volunteers are there. You can pick up. You'll be given some prasad as you leave the ashram. Again, thank you all for coming, and all the volunteers for all their effort. And we're trying to keep everything. It's not very easy to do things without Swamiji's knowledge at this ashram. So, I'm finding that a little bit more and more each year. But we pulled off a little surprise for
Wonderful. Thank
Swamiji.
you.
Thank you all for coming, and happy Deepavali.
Well done. Om sarve bhavantu sukhinaha sarve santu niramayaha sarve bhadrani pashyantu ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya Mrityorma amritangamaya Om Shanti 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 Om Tat Sat.